Welcome to another episode of the Peak Performance Selling Podcast, where we interview top sellers and sales leaders to learn the different tips, tricks, and mental strategies that they use to create sustainable peak performance. Let's get rolling. Welcome to this week's episode of the Peak Performance Selling Podcast. I am beyond excited today to welcome on Jake Dunlap. I've been following him for many years. You'll find him on LinkedIn, and there are a bunch of other places, but Jake has a really cool background, and I'm excited to really pull a lot of lessons and learning from him that he's shared on LinkedIn, and more context that we'll be able to dig into mindset, how he thinks about leadership, how he's seen a lot of different companies scale and grow over the years to some pretty awesome results, and now how he's helping other companies do this. And so a little bit about Jake. He designs repeatable, sustainable sales models and processes that outperform industry standards. As the founder and CEO of Scaled Consulting, Jake helps executives around the world accelerate business growth with data-backed sales solutions. Before Scaled, he held roles as VP of Sales at No Wait, acquired by Yelp, who I actually still use to this day, head of sales and customer success at Chartbeat, and he was a VP of sales at Glassdoor before they got acquired by Recruit Holdings for a little number of like $1.2 billion in 2018. So Jake, welcome onto the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that was a great intro. I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, luckily you've built that career along the way. So I just get to read it off. But talk to me a little bit about, you've seen so many of these different companies scale and grow and exit. And I'd just love to hear, what are one or two of the really impactful learning experiences that shaped or defined your sales career?
Yeah, if I think about, and maybe I'll do like a earlier and later for the audience. So the first I would say was when I was at a company called Career Builder in like the mid to late 2000s. I had a boss named Evan Ross, and I've told this story a few times, but when I think back to like some moments that really shaped my career, there's a couple actually that happened at Career Builder, like almost back-to-back times. The first was I was in a training class of like 8 people. And I was coming out, I'd been in sports before that. And I thought I was God's gift. I'm like, dude, I'm the best. Like, I'm going to crush everything. Like I remember in the interview, like the woman later, she told me she almost didn't hire me because I was kind of cocky in the interview process. But fast forward and it's a month, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks into the job, and I haven't sold anything. And then I'm like the second to last person to not sell anything. And I'm like, oh my God, like what's happening? And my director came and he said, and I think he listened to one of my calls to my boss's boss. And he's like, why aren't you following the script? Like, why aren't you following the process? And I'm like, the process, come on, man. Like I can just go out and make it happen. And he's like, dude, do you think we're stupid? Do you think we train 1,000 salespeople on something that doesn't work? And I was like, well, no, probably not. He's like, exactly. And he's like, just drink the Kool-Aid. And sure enough, the next month I closed 60,000 in new business. And that for me was when I realized sales is a process. It is just as much science, if not more science than art, and that there are right and wrong ways to move customers through a journey based on your sales cycle, who you sell to, et cetera. And so I was able to take that framework for me throughout my career. And still, I would say even some of the work that we do at Scaled is, from, evolutions of different processes that I've learned over time and executing those processes. And then I think, I'm trying to think, what's another quick one? I'd say one of the big learnings, my first VP job, again, when I was with the VP of sales at Glassdoor and success and ops, is, invest in training and onboarding early. Meaning, and do it for your leaders. That is, you're growing and you're scaling. If you've got new leaders leading new people, that is not a recipe for success. And I think I didn't do a very good job of that. And so, as I somewhat have learned from my mistakes, I think a lot of times what we're doing now is helping companies not do that. So as they go through those phases of growth, that they lay the foundation, people are set up for success. I literally just sent out a statement of work today about us helping to take over a company's onboarding because they're growing so fast. It's like, why would you pull in your managers to do this? Like we can do it for you. So the importance of that, really investing in people early on to get them up to speed versus just throwing them to the wolves and saying like, go listen to our top rep. Those are my two.
Yeah. I've seen that one,
of course,
fall on its face many times.
That's most people though, man. That's most. The most common is like, go sit next to Ricky. He's the top performer. It's like, I am nothing like this dude. He's been doing this for a year. Like I need to get to like halfway to first base. Like Ricky's like rounding for home, it's just, people don't actually learn that way.
So how do you think people learn the best?
Doing. You need to match people with, again, you need to have an onboarding process that doesn't just stop after a week or 2 weeks. It's like, and now what are you layering on in week 5? What are you laying on week 6 and 7? And role plays and real life and getting people on the phones and getting feedback and listening to calls. It's doing, right? Like imagine if you're going to be a quarterback, you're going to be Patrick Mahomes, right? Because I know you're a big Chiefs fan too, right? So you're going to be Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes, you're going to get better by watching Alex Smith only and not throwing the football. It's kind of silly, right? When you think about it like that, because that's not how people learn. Now he might watch and pick up a little pointer here or there, but you're not going to become all time by watching or not participating or not trying.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Do you have like a split or a balance of, okay, we want you to spend, and it's going to be different for each company, but like we want you to spend the first month, no quota, just learn product, and then 90-10, like have some support from somebody where you chime in a little bit and move that over a couple months, or how do you think about that process?
Exactly right. Yeah. Like I'm a big fan of what's called an MBO, which is a management by objectives, which means maybe month 1, the goal is to set, let's say 5 meetings, and then the next is 7, and then it's 9, and it's to conduct 10 discovery calls, and then it's 12, and then it's 15. It's about incentivizing the behaviors that the leads to the legs. A leg is a sale. The leads are all the things that go into that. And so incentivizing, maybe in month 3, the incentive is you've got 6 deals that move from stage 2 to stage 3. So whatever that is for your company or for whatever role you're hiring for, in the first 2 to 3 months, think about incentivizing the behaviors that will lead to the outcomes down the road versus today.
Really cool. I'd be curious your perspective, as I know you guys do some work like bringing, VPs of sales into organizations and things of this sort. How do you see that ramp process for new leaders or new managers coming into an organization working maybe a little bit differently, because they're now expected to support a team? And a lot of times I find teams rely on their leaders for product knowledge and insight. And if they're coming from the outside, how do you see that working?
Yeah, when they come from the outside, look, it's all about the people, man. That I don't need to know the product that well. I don't need to really know much. All I need to do is get to know Jake or John or Scott or Sean or Susan or Eva, whatever. So I think for a lot of people, if I understand where you're at today, what your motivations are, what you're trying to, what you're trying to accomplish, then like amazing. I can now help to put together a development plan because I can invest in you. And then I can get up to speed on some of those things as well too. So I think focus on building the relationships and the trust with the team and the product, and those things also, they need to happen quickly. But it's the people that are going to execute it.
This is really good. You mentioned a word that I'm super curious about, and you said trust. And I find there are a lot of different ways to get there. How do you think about building trust, and what does that really mean to you as a leader? And how do you know when you've got there?
Ooh, that's a good one. Follow through. Consistency. It's consistency and empathy, meaning I show up a very similar way most times, almost always. I follow through on my commitments. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it, or I tell you, I give you advance warning and when I can't. And I can show empathy when I communicate, right? And I can show like, look, I have been in your shoes. Like, I get it. I understand what you're going through. Like, let's talk through it. I think without empathy, not sympathy, not being overly nice, real empathy, which I think of as, I don't need to understand where someone's coming from. I don't have to like placate to that person. I just need to understand so I can better communicate with that person, because now I know kind of where they're at mentally or based on their experience. And then I show up consistently throughout the process. That's how you build rapport. That's how I build rapport, right? As opposed to like, am I the most likable person, being overly friendly, like all of that. So that's how you build trust, consistency, empathy, for sure. And then what was the second part? You had a second part.
How do you know when you've got it as a leader?
You can edit that part out. So how do you, well, here's the thing. You never have it. Trust isn't something that you get from someone. It's something you rent from someone, because trust can be destroyed like this in 5 seconds by inconsistency in actions, calling someone out in front of their peers, etc. And so I think it's an important mindset that you are always renting the trust. And so you're always having to align in consistency and showing up from an empathy, depending on where that person's at. I struggled with this as a leader. I really did, because I wasn't very like situationally, I was like aware, but I just didn't care. And so sometimes I would show up, man, like, let's say the person, like maybe their girlfriend like dumped them, or, something like really bad, like something happened. And I think I struggled to really then like give that person slack, or like, thinking like, if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. So I think it's that, we also talk about different types of listening. There's like I can't remember what the middle one is, like active, and then like global, which is like, when I'm listening, I'm thinking about everything that's going on with that person, both how they, what are they, their body motions, like what do they look like in terms of like their, do they look sad or upset, or, those types of things. And I'm thinking about all these things as we're actively engaged in a conversation. So I think leaders need to be more focused on being aware and being active in the conversation, and understanding that trust is rented.
That's such a fantastic thought, because it is something that can go, it's takes a while to build, but can disappear in seconds. And with one word even can totally lose trust with the team and with a prospect, with individuals. It doesn't really matter. That is something that is rented. I really love that thought. And you mentioned listening, and I've heard you talk a few times in the past about your maybe challenge to be a great listener early on in your sales career, and falling in love with that mute button. And I guess I'm curious, like what are most people? Well, do you still have to use the mute button these days?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, all the time.
Still use it. I love it.
Still use it.
And so what do most sellers get wrong, or even managers get wrong about listening? I like those three kind of types of listening you just mentioned, but early sellers, like, what do they get wrong about listening?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a good question. The answer is maybe a little different, meaning if I think about what the issue is, let me tell you the other reason why having an outline and a script is actually freeing. And it wasn't until I started to master that process and learn the script and the messaging that I actually could actively listen. Because I want you to think about this. The reason, in my opinion, I don't know if it's my opinion. I think we as humans, we suck at multitasking. We're actually not very good at it, right? And we have a very high switching cost time to where our brain catches up. And so imagine if you're in a meeting, a sales meeting, and you're always thinking about the next question you're going to ask. How can I be there with you? How can I be just grounded? I'm here and I'm just like hanging on your every word. If I don't have a script, I don't know what the next question is going to be, and that's when I call it like the ping pong conversation, where it's like, or like shiny object, or like laser cat toy. It's like, people hear one thing and then, you ask one question, we've all been there, and they give you like answers to like 7 other questions that maybe you're planning to ask later. And then they like can't help themselves. So they jump to that question, and then they jump here and they jump here, and they think that it's like free flowing, but it's not. It actually is. When you go back and listen to it, it sounds like a mess, as opposed to like, okay, great. They gave you that information, write it down to ask them in 4 minutes to follow up on that. And then you go to the next thing. Okay, great. So you mentioned this. Let's talk. Oh, hey, so earlier in the conversation, you talked about you're using these tools. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you love about it? So I think you can't actively listen if you're always thinking about the next thing to say. And so that is probably the skill, or the thing that I would say why people struggle is because they're multitasking and maybe they don't even know it. Same thing, like when I'm having a goal, there's certain meetings, look, and my team, this is something I've actively worked on, like, not emailing here or there, like you see in a notification. And so when I'm in a meeting, I'm here, I'm present, right? I'm here with you. I'm not focusing on this. Why? So I can think about this conversation, not 7 other things. So you can't actively listen if you don't have a plan. It's very, very difficult.
It's really interesting. And you mentioned multitasking, and I have this app that I love to use. I read on my Kindle all the time, and I use this app called Readwise, which, like, I'm not sponsored, but is my favorite one because it pulls up different highlights for you all the time. And you mentioned multitasking, and it pulled one up for me, I think yesterday morning, that said multitasking wasn't a word until the 60s came around and we had computers, because it is about computers. As humans, we do not multitask. We focus on one task, switch to the next. It's not a thing.
It's like how I've got another good one. It's like, I think it was the 20s, there was no such word as priorities, because you can't have more than one priority. Like, it's impossible, because it's almost like multitasking on priorities, right? Like you can't. And so literally, I think it was the 20s, we invented the word we made priority a plural word, and it was never intended to be a plural word. So that's another fun one for you.
This is a good one. History has so much to teach us. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about, so many managers are tasked to be the curators of future talent within the organization. They are supposed to be coaching and developing. But from what I've found, and when I talk to a lot of individuals, most managers either don't spend the time coaching or just aren't very good at it. And I'm curious, like, what do you think the challenge is for most managers to really be effective coaches?
Yeah, well, I'll give you some stats too. McKinsey? Yeah, McKinsey did a study. Actually, they made it public now. LinkedIn's a large client of ours, and McKinsey had done a project with them right before us. And I don't know if this is from that study, or maybe this is Gartner. I can't remember exactly. And it was the optimal coaching for performance is 3 to 4 hours a month. That's it. Right. And I think let me try to also define the word coaching. There's a difference between deal coaching and skills coaching. Skills take time. So I'm talking about skills coaching right now. Right. So you don't need to invest that. We're talking 3 hours a month with each one of your reps. That's not a ton of time. Right. And I think too often, but then let's talk about the juxtaposition between these two, between skills and deal coaching, deal coaching and skills coaching. Deal coaching, if you only focus on deal coaching, you will nurture dependency within your sales org. I've done it too many times to count. And every time I look back and I give myself the face palm, and I'm like, dude, you spoon fed this dude. You coached him so much. He's looking at you for the play. Right. And then there's ways that you can kind of untangle that over time too, but it takes time, because then you got to learn how to not do it. So, if you are nurturing dependence, sometimes I think managers do it subconsciously because it feels good. You're the answers guy, right? Everyone goes to Catherine because Catherine has all the answers, and that's a dopamine thing. We like that. That makes us feel good. And so that's part of it, right? That's deal coaching, right? And I think the other thing is that understanding how to use different questions. that really great coaching isn't always giving advice. Sometimes it's just asking, well, what do you think you should do in this situation? Now, I had a boss, I'll tell you this, it drove me. It was dumb. It was like he had learned this in like a textbook or something. And so like I would come to him with a fully baked plan. I'm at like step Z, like the end. And I'm like, look, I've got option 2, option 3. Here's what I'm thinking, etc. Tell me why this is. Well, what do you think, dude? Just tell me. We don't need to do this. I've already thought through it. So you have to be careful sometimes some of those questions. And but anyway, coaching is about helping people to self-discover. The same way, like that's a good discovery call, right? I'm helping the prospect to self-discover these gaps or these issues that they may or may not have known about. And so when you're working with your people, it's the same way. So what I would encourage every leader to do is make sure that you've got time where you might be coaching around deals, but make sure you've got separate time, never in the same, helping them to skill develop. Okay, this quarter, we've self-assessed. It's about active listening. Let's take active listening. So I'm going to listen to 2 calls, right? I want you to listen to them, and then we're going to discuss them next Thursday. Okay, great. What did you hear? How did you? So I think every manager, if you're listening to this, check yourself to make sure you have skills and goals coaching time along with deals coaching. Because what I'm seeing is a massive degrade right now in investing in the person versus managing more and more to the numbers. And so that's probably the biggest mistake, but also the biggest area of opportunity for sure.
Yeah, I think there is massive room for opportunity in that space. And it actually gets me onto another question that I wanted to ask you about. I've loved a lot of the content that you're posting on LinkedIn. And I saw one from you recently about just throwing bodies at a problem. And I've been at startups where it's all about headcount. And I hear that now and I pretty much just throw up in my mouth a little bit every time we just talk about headcount, because I do think it starts to pull away this unique human element that we have. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we really bring our best selves to work and use that unique kind of humanity that we have that maybe computers don't, as we think about scaling and growing organizations.
All right, there's a few questions in there, so I'm going to try to go through them. I'm going to try to go through them logically or chronologically. The first is the bodies at it. I remember my first experience with this. I was 26, I think, as a sales manager, and I was interviewing 2 women named Jennifer. Okay, and the HR guy comes to me, and I'm like, okay, ding this one, and I want to extend an offer to this one. Somehow he didn't hear the first part, and he extends an offer to both of them. Okay, I go to my director. I'm like, dude, he just extended the offer to both of them. Like, I gotta call this person. He's like, fuck it, we need bodies. I'm like, all right. So I hired them both, and guess what? The one I didn't want to hire flamed out in 45 days in a blaze of glory. And so that was my first introduction to the head count as a, as a thing that you do to grow, right? Is just throw bodies at it. And, because look, it looks really nice on a spreadsheet. You're just this many people is this much quota, multiplied by churn, and then it spits out gold, right? And so we kind of tend to look at headcount as a magical fix for hitting revenue targets. And that if we're, that it's hiring's fault, maybe at times while we're not hitting, and it very well can be sometimes we're not hitting revenue goals. The biggest issue though is this: sales leaders, when it comes to the Sales Hall of Fame or how cool people think you are, it's based on headcount. And it's that singular thing, that singular mindset that a sales leader's worth is determined by the amount of people she or he has ever led when it comes to people thinking you're legit or not, right? So I give this example all the time, okay? Rachel scales a team to 100 or revenue to 100 million with 30 reps. Similar industry. John does it with 200 reps. At the end, the next job they go to, people will think John is more qualified. right? John will get an opportunity to go manage a 600-person team, a 500-person team. Rachel will not. And until we realize that it's about, especially with sales technology, right, that we don't need to just push bodies at it. If we can just start to harness these tools, our actual team can be more productive. So we can get 20% revenue growth without having to add X amount more people, which is, again, the old equation, because we didn't have a lot of sales tech. Rewind 6-7 years ago, we had Salesforce, HubSpot, like that's kind of all we had, right? And now you fast forward and we've got over 2,000 sales technologies. So there weren't necessarily ways to drive growth outside of people, and now there is. And so I think more and more organizations, the kind of the warning I give to a lot of VPs of sales is, in today's world, you can't outsource your knowledge of sales tech to your ops person. You need to know it so you can scale in a more modern way, to where you don't need to add as many headcount. Instead, you can add less headcount, and those people will be happier, more productive, less territory shifts. If you can just move from only using 20 to 30% of your tech stack to using 50, 60, 70% of your tech stack. So that's what I've learned about hiring, that we've got, it starts at the top. It starts with perception and biases that we have around size. There's like a million innuendos I could make there. But that's where it all starts, man. And I think, but it won't last, right? Like we'll have a reckoning, and it's already on its way. So, but that's kind of the current state of it.
This is great. There are too many good nuggets in there that I think are really powerful as we see. Again, I just see so many people treat us, as we talk about multitasking and priorities, as we treat ourselves as humans like computers, and we're much different. And we can actually get leverage from technology opposed to just trying to push and be always on and push. It's like, no, there's the ability to really generate leverage out of those tools and technologies and work, sorry for the cliche, but smarter, not harder, and really be much more effective in today's day and age, where tech and sales has evolved so much in the last handful of years. Throw the pandemic on there, throw more remote work, and we're working in a totally new environment. But I do see a lot of sellers, whether, I talk to top performers all day working with them, and folks that are, struggling to get their footing, struggling with burnout, struggling with managing themselves, and really understanding, how do they bounce back from feeling just burnt out, even though they may have had their best month, their best year, their career, and they're still struggling. And I'm curious to hear how you think about burnout and managing yourself as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting. I got a little like a different view maybe on burnout. If you are doing something that you really enjoy, even when it's hard, you don't feel it. If I'm just being perfectly candid, I've been tired in my career and life. But once I realized, like, look, I really love sales. Like, I love learning. I'm like naturally very curious. I love learning, and sales to me is like checks like those boxes on some like next level, because it's evolving so quickly. So I'm always pushing myself to stay on top of trends and be better, etc. There's so many books and podcasts and things to read, like, and I'm talking to people, and again, active listening. I'm really trying to understand their business to see, hey, is there a way that I can help here or not? And that's kind of, then consulting even checks it at like another level, because then it's like I'm doing that 24/7, right? Of whenever we work with companies. So I really feel like a lot of burnout comes from people not aligning what their passions are. I had a woman on my podcast, Laura Gassner-Otting. She wrote a book called Limitless that you all should check out. And she talks about this a lot in her book, that if you align what the things that you're good at, or like, you don't have to be great, decent at, and the things that you enjoy and get energy from, that's the job you should be doing. And it doesn't mean that there won't be hard points, especially when you're starting a new job. Right. Of course, you're going to suck at cold calling for the first month or two. Right. But are you really busting your hump to get better at it or not? Like, of course, you're going to sound like an idiot your first 50 discovery calls. but are you working and putting in the work to get better at it because you really like it and you're passionate about like helping people and what the product is? So I feel like burnout is an outcome from people fighting what they actually should be doing and being too scared to have a conversation with their boss or their company and saying, look, let me tell you what I love about this. It's this. Here's what I don't want to do. And here's why. I think in her book, I think it was Laura. It's like 1 hour spent of it's like a 500% increase in productivity for like, it's something like that. It's like every hour you spend doing that other stuff that you dread or hate versus an hour spent there, you're like, the delta between going kind of negative to positive is like 500% more productive, something like that. So I would challenge everyone who's struggling with burnout to think about what I just said, right? Are you doing what you are really interested in? Do you feel like you have a path forward? Do you know what that path forward is? Yeah. And that is what I've found is the actual cause of burnout. It's people not doing that. And instead they're just mentally taxed on things that they just don't enjoy doing or are not qualified to do, et cetera. And then that ends up happening.
I really like that because what I find is it all comes down to the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we have in our head, and hearing how you talk about doing what you're doing now and even seeing that impact, the ability to, hey, can I help here, multiply as you move into consulting. Like that's where we get our passion and our fire. But when I show up and just say, I'm here to make some more calls today, I'm here to close another deal, I need to hit the number, and there's no real connection to any other meaning behind it, is when it just becomes this, I'm a factory worker on the floor, just like producing widgets, that takes away a lot of the value that we can bring to the table as humans.
Yeah, but also I'll flip it too. It's your responsibility to be happy. It's not your company's. And what I mean by that is like, you can find joy. It's like, if you're constantly doing that, like you're probably one of those people who will never be happy. And not you, I'm talking about proverbial you, is if you're constantly like, no, I got to go punch the clock. A lot of those people I see, like they're always punch the clock people because they don't they're not focused on the learning. Every day is a chance to learn. Every day is a chance to get better. Every day is a chance to try new shit and break new things and try like something different. And too many people create they create like a fixed mindset of this is my lot in life. Well, I got to go down, like you said, punch. That is a prison that you have created for yourself. It does not exist. Most of your bosses want you to be happy and they want you to be productive. And so you've got to try to align what you're doing and don't create false walls. I call it like there's people who just like, they create these walls. And it's like, and again, this goes back, I think part of this is DNA, a little bit of hardwired. I'm hardwired this way. I'm hardwired to find shortcuts. I'm hardwired to challenge the status quo, which has got me fired multiple times, as you can imagine, not for performance, but for being, maybe a little too much at times. But anybody can do this. It's like whenever you take a step, whenever it's like, I created this mental image. I don't know when this happened in my life, but it had to have been earlier, where what I do is I kind of think of like the Great Wall. It's not ironic. It's almost like that Great Wall from, what is that? Game of Thrones, right? The wall. And what you do is when you actually take 4 steps back from the wall, like if you're that close and you're just looking at the wall, you're just going to see bricks. You're like, there's no chance. But man, when you take a step back, you look down, you're like, oh shit, there's a rope. And then you look way down there. Oh wait, there's a ladder. Oh wait, there's actually a door over here. Like there's so many possibilities of how to tackle things. And then the next step is and then you're frustrated. You're like, well, there's no way to do it. Google YouTube. You want to know how to Google YouTube it. Whatever challenge it is, man, how do I do whatever? Google YouTube. Like, so there's ways to get around this wall. Like they already exist. 99.999% of all the options that have already been solved. Like all the problems you have, like 9,000 whatever people have already solved those problems. So just go do what they're doing. And so again, I feel like there's this like, you can't be a victim in the process. You can't put yourself in that jail. You can't be that person who just sees the wall. You have to own your own career development too, and your own career happiness. And most companies and most people are good people and good companies at their core, and they will help you, but you've got to take the ownership yourself first.
It's really good. And getting into the fixed mindset versus growth mindset, I think is really powerful. That I've been surprised a lot of people that I meet and train haven't learned about growth mindset. And so that's one of the foundational elements that I actually try to bring to folks is, if you don't believe that you can grow and get better, all the sales training, all the tactics, all the tips, all the tech, like it's usually not worth it. And so I love the example too of step back from that wall and like, oh, there's possibilities here that I hadn't seen.
The problem has been solved. Every single problem in your life, like anybody listen to this, 100% of the problems that you are facing have already been solved. It's already been solved. Therefore, it is doable. So what are you going to do about it? Like it's not every problem has been solved. And so I think too many, like you said, it's that fixed mindset, and it's 100% wrong. Like the problems have been solved. You're battling depression, drinking whatever the thing is, it's been solved. Go find a process, try it, do it, see what works for you. But someone else has solved that problem already.
And we have access to it. We've got the internet. It's out
Google,
there.
YouTube.
I love that.
Google, YouTube.
It's so powerful. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of the younger society that's so used to YouTube.
Oh,
everything.
Hell yeah.
I think they're going to come in and kick our butts when they get into the workforce here more and more in the near future.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you. So my son's 70s, he's in first grade. I'm like, why aren't they teaching him how to Google stuff? Like, why? Like, I'm teaching my kids how to Google stuff. Like, I'm teaching him how to use eBay. My kid lists like he'll find like, hey dad, can we sell this on eBay? Absolutely. My kid knows how to take a picture, he'll upload it. He literally, he didn't even need me. He's 7. Doesn't even need me to use it. My kid started using Alexa when he was 1.5. Like we had the very first Alexa. He asked Alexa if we could wipe his nose. It was like one of the funniest things ever. Like, Alexa, wipe my nose. Because he's like, I ask Alexa for things. And now Alexa's going off. Alexa, stop. There you go. It's hilarious. She just
no more need for the.
I broke my nose.
There's no more need for the lemonade stand for kids these days, I guess. It's like you can sell it on eBay now. And you're already hustling. That's amazing. Yeah. I'd be curious as you think about like the mindset that if somebody steps into a leadership position and maybe moves into manager, director, VP, what is the mindset shift that really needs to happen or that you learned that you maybe don't see enough yet?
The job is completely different. Like the job is there's the most common type of sales leader today is what is called the hero leader, meaning your worth is determined by helping your team get to quota, right? And unfortunately, that's not what your worth is. Your worth is actually how many people get promoted for my team every year. That's it. I figured this game out really early. If I could build a team where everybody wanted to come work for me internally because I had the most promotions and the most people hitting quota, that I would win. And so I did. I have a company of 1,000+ sellers. We had 25 teams in my division. My team was number 1 to quota 2 years in a row, and I had the most promotions for my team. And it was because my job as a manager, as a leader, was to I've always looked at this. My job as a leader is to get you on your path. Maybe that's here. Maybe you're going to be a DJ. Maybe you're going to start your own Whole Foods company. Amazing. Whatever that is, man, I want that for you. And I think if instead I'm focused on what have you done for me, I saw there was another manager. I'll never forget this guy. I still kind of despise him to this day. He's actually like a decent dude, but I don't know. I've got a thing for him. And he told his people, don't take a promotion. You're making more money now. Why would you do that? And it's like, man, dude, you're just stunting these people's growth, so what? It's not about that. And I never played the money game. I'm like, dude, I'm going to take the growth game, because then that's when the money comes raining down years later, is when you play the growth game over the money game now. And so I think for a lot of managers, just don't forget that your job is to build and develop people and to build and develop skills, not to be the hero 24/7. You can go in and help. Sure. Why not? But that's not the job. The job is people.
This is really good. I think it's hard to do that. But I think it's really, really powerful to say, yeah, we're here to help. And the stunting people's growth, that I can't.
Yeah,
I can see cool. why you'd be a little upset with that one. You mentioned something. You had an awesome LinkedIn post pretty recently with like your lessons that you've learned along the way recently, and you talk about getting uncomfortable. And I think it aligns pretty nicely with what you just talked about on like going for growth versus just the money. How do you train yourself to be uncomfortable, or how do you get to one of your other points around knowing yourself? Like, how do you train yourself to be uncomfortable, or is that natural and easy for you?
No, it's totally learned. And again, I think like there's so many of these things that, and again, if you have a fixed mindset, then you're going to always think that everything's like natural. Now, I don't know. Did I have like some inclination for it? Maybe like, you know what I mean? Like, was I predisposed to, I don't know, being more, more open? I don't know. But, for me, I'll tell you how I read a book. I actually gave this book to this kid like 5 years later. I'll never forget this. And he was so offended that I gave it to him. It was called How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. I read to it as a CD, just for all of you out there. It was a CD book before we had audible.com. And there were some mechanisms they talked about. And, the one thing that I took away, I remember this, there's a couple of things like this, like hand-heart alignment thing. I don't remember the whole thing on that, but it was like developing a trigger. And so what I did is I was like 26, maybe at the time, 25, 26, 27, somewhere around there. And like, I developed this thing where I literally, I can close my eyes, see it almost like it's there. I flip a switch, like I mentally, like a switch that gets flipped. I see a light bulb and I lean in. And it's every time I get that feeling that when you get that uncomfortable feeling, your body has a split second to kind of sit there with it or to move past it. And that it's like, I always equate it to doing pull-ups. I haven't done pull-ups in a long time. I'm going to suck at it for a while. But when I get calluses and I do it consistently, it gets easier. There is no discomfort. And so when you start to shorten the amount of time you let that uncomfortableness set and instead you lean in, those things stop becoming uncomfortable. And so I developed that technique of that light bulb, of the switch, or it could be whatever it is for you, whatever like a good primer or a good trigger is for you, do it. And then the second part was I remember I remember this like it was yesterday, same age range. I'm probably around that, like 26 or so. And I was on a call, and it's toward the end of the call, and we pretty decent call, I guess. And the guys at the end, it's like, yeah, this is interesting. Send me some information and blah, 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 right? Like, which I know deep down is like, this dude is not sold, and I'm going to send stuff and it's going to go straight to delete. And I'm like, Jake, lean in right now and like confront this thing head on. Like, you need to call out and you need to say, hey, look, I hear you. I'm happy to do that. But tell me, I can hear a little hesitation in your voice. Like, tell me a little bit about kind of like what you're thinking right now, man. That's what I should have said. Instead, I was like, okay, sounds good. And I hung up and I got off the phone. I'm like, you are a punk. You know exactly what you should have done, and you wimped out. And so what I see is sales reps, most great sales reps I know have had that exact moment. They had a moment where they're like, no more, I'm not living like this. And so I made an oath. I will never hang up the phone and have that feeling again. I will always go for 15 minutes of discomfort, 15 seconds of discomfort to ask that tough question, as opposed to 25 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, hours of beating myself up later, right? Or just knowing that I left something on the table, knowing that I left like my best possible performance on the table. And so those were my moments around discomfort. And I think anybody is capable of doing. And I'm telling you, every top rep, and I even say this to teams or reps, I'm like, and when I see people are passive, I'm like, you're just not fed up enough. Like, you're just not to the point where you care more about leaving it all on the field than you do about being easy and passive and just saying, okay, yeah, sounds good. So those are my two kind of I guess, lessons on discomfort.
I really love those because I still sit in those areas of comfort, but giving yourself those triggers or mechanisms to say, like, I got to get out of this. See that switch flip. Here goes the light. I'm going for it is a really fantastic way to condition your brain and use neuroscience and neuroplasticity to say, yeah, I'm going to make that pathway the one that becomes easier and easier over time, like your pull-up example. That's really cool.
Exactly right. And just think the final thought on that is it's the same 30-minute meeting, whether you give 100% or 60%. And so you don't, and then guess what? Then I chill for a second, right? Because it can be, you can't always be, but again, because I've done it more, it's easier for me to be on for like extended periods now, but you can't be on 24/7. So like, I can't flip that switch full time. The switch needs to turn off sometimes. Right. And so it's like people, if you're multitasking during a meeting and you're not dialed in and you're not focused on it, you're not going to give 100%. And then afterwards, give yourself that permission to flip the switch off and not be on.
I like that. I think there's that element of like recharge and renewal and also preventing burnout when you can say, okay, yeah, I know I don't have to be 100% on here. All right, couple rapid fire questions for you as we wrap up. What's your favorite interview question to ask somebody you're interviewing to become a seller?
To become a seller? There's a few. There's like we're very structured in how we interview now. I was not in previous worlds. The question I say, and by the way, we ask this about every job that they've had, but it's a sub question 4 out of 5 that we ask. And it's, when I talk to your boss, what's their name? How do you spell that? John. Even if it's John Smith, can you spell the last name, please? Smith. Okay, thank you. John Smith. Okay. And he was your boss at blah, blah, blah. Great. Okay. So when I talk to John, how is he going to rate your performance on a scale of 1 to 10 and why? And what that does is when you use hypotheticals in interviews, you get the hypothetical answer. It's people's visions of themselves. But if it's an A player, they go, oh, well, John would say this, blah, 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 blah. If it's not, they'll go, well, John and I, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. That happens. But then you see a pattern. So we ask that same question about every job that they've had, and we'll go.
Really cool.
We'll go back. So that's it. When I talk to your boss, how will they rate you? How do you spell their name? Make them spell it. How will they rate you? And that's from a book. I think that one's from Top Grading, maybe. It's from Top Grading or Who. I can't remember.
I like it. I like that a lot. Do you love winning or dislike losing more?
Man, I'm going to give a really weird answer. I really don't care about either. Meaning I love the game, dude. I love the game. Those are outcomes. And here's what I know. I'm going to give it 100% 24/7. 24/7. I know I put 100% into that deal. And if it wins, I'm like, yeah, I like winning. Where I'm like, yeah, but if I lose it, and then I'm like, okay, where did I lose it? Nope, happy years. I heard this thing or I didn't hear this thing. I love the game. Winning and losing is an outcome, but I focus on giving 100%. And that's what actually energizes me.
That's fantastic. Last one. What does success mean to you today?
Success today, and this is the evolution for me, going from salesperson to manager to leader to VP of sales to CEO for the last 8 years. But I feel like I've just started to really become a CEO and not like a glorified sales leader in the last few. Winning today is creating an amazing company that people love to come to. They want to work at. They're being challenged in a good way, and they're growing. Our culture is at an all-time high right now. And I'm so excited about it. And I think it's from, us doing a much better job over the last few years of just, again, doing some of the things I'm talking about now. Go back to focus on the people. Are they set up for success? Do they know what success looks like, et cetera? So that's what I'm excited about now.
That's awesome. I love the evolution of that. So Jake, where can folks find you? Where's the best place to track you down?
LinkedIn. Yeah, definitely. You can do that. You can always email me, jake@scaled.com. YouTube, we're putting in a lot of work on YouTube. I'm doing 3 or 4 videos a week now on YouTube. So if you're looking for like tactical advice, like I would check out YouTube. I think I've got 400 something videos up now on YouTube. it's a lot of fun too. We've got some, like, we're doing some more like fun, interesting stuff over there too. So it's a fun outlet.
Awesome. We will link to all those in the show notes. Well, Jake Dunlap, a ton of nuggets that I take some notes during this, highlight, bold point, underline. So this was really great. Until next time, let's go make it a great day.
It's thanks to help from listeners like you, this podcast can continue to grow and help others. If you found anything helpful in today's episode, please take a second, share with a friend, and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast today. Thanks.